I have a friend, a dear friend, who just entered, last month in fact, her 9th decade. And a couple years ago, she decided that she would use her good china every day. Why not? She's a person of much awareness, so she does so knowing the privilege that she has and the care she wants to take every day with every meal. And that's actually one of the reasons she chose to do this. Sometimes I think that we here in this liberal faith are doing that too, except we use the dishes every day and we don't always remember how valuable they are. So in case you're wondering, this is a sermon about the exquisite nature of the everyday dishes of our religious heritage. So we gather here each week, and we affirm the things we know. And one of them is that human life is precious, and another is that human actions are powerful, and a third is that we can act better together than we can act alone. And I want to give a shout out today to the truths that undergird these things in our liberal religion. And one thing I will say as I start is that many of the great minds, many of the great thinkers in our tradition are actually really hard to read in their original forms. If anyone who's read Ralph Waldo Emerson in the original will just attest, you could think back to those college days, perhaps. Well, James Luther Adams, whose work we're highlighting today, he has that kind of brilliance that also has a similar density. He was a parish minister, he was a social activist, he was a journal editor, a scholar, a translator, and he also worked a great deal with German theologians. So he probably was allowed to have the right to be a little incomprehensible. But my great goal today is to try to make a couple of his points accessible to us. You see, on the liberal side of religion, we can feel a lot like the David facing the Goliaths of a more rigid or life-denying belief systems that seem to be all around us, whether they're religious systems or systems within our common culture. So Adams, who was a professor of, pretty much the last professor of theology we had from 1960 to about 10 years ago, and who informed a lot of the ministers who have been mentors to my generation of ministers, Adams had a worldview that he forged because he was in Germany as Nazism was coming to power. And a lot of what he believed was formed by watching that. And so for him, he was inspired by the David of the Hebrew Bible, the fact that David made those powerful weapons out of just those 5 smooth stones which he picked up off the ground. And he believes that in the same way, we can slay the oppressive giants of our times with just a few fragments of the bedrock of our shared heritage. Adams lifts up 5 elements of liberal faith, which he says are the 5 smooth stones of religious liberalism. And he says that they're at the heart of who we are together. And they've rung true enough over the years that they've been interpreted again and again and again. So you'll hear a number of interpretations, which we've already heard this service. What I want to do today is to look at these not as abstract ideas, but in terms of the real commitments we make here every day. Here's the first smooth stone in Adams' words. Religious liberalism depends on the principle that revelation is continuous. Okay, that's a little dense. Our religious tradition, what that's saying is a living tradition, because we're always allowed to learn new truths. And every generation is allowed to reinterpret meaning for the challenges of its age. So today, we are allowed to seek that which allows us and helps us cope with an age where our children lose their innocence far earlier than ever before, where adolescence has been extended into a period of what they're now calling odyssey that extends through the 30s, where life itself has been extended beyond whatever was possible or normal before, so that a person in their 70s or 80s might really factually be seen as still being in the prime of life. Just spend a morning with our Elder Journey group if you have any doubt. One of my colleagues, Peter Friedrichs, puts it this way. He says, we believe that revelation and truth, new truths, are constantly revealed. And we are a people who know with our Buddhist cousins that change is the only constant. We don't believe that we're bound by a rigid or unevolved truth that's unbending as life changes around us. So that's the first smooth stone. Adam talks about the second one this way. All relations between persons ought ideally to rest on mutual free consent and not on coercion. In other words, we freely choose to enter into relationship with one another, and we allow those relationships to be governed by open and democratic processes. Or as Friedrich says, we choose relationship with one another and we live in a covenant of being. To be in human relationship is the most glorious and the most difficult of things. And we're compelled here to live in right relationship with one another, as challenging as that can be. This is the place where we hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we try to speak with each other and allow ourselves to understand where we disagree. And as those who were in my Discerning our Core Beliefs class remember from yesterday, we often don't think alike, and that is one of the things we celebrate here. And yet that can only be celebrated if we are willing to have the hard conversations with one another. This is the place where we understand that we stand by one another when times are hard and when times are good too. And this is something this congregation does again and again. And that's why I hear people say things quite a bit like, I'm glad I came here. It's a place where I can believe in the goodness of people again, which someone said to me last week. Or, this is where I want my children to learn how to behave towards others. So now we have stone number 3. Adam's words, religious liberalism affects the moral obligation to direct one's effort towards the establishment of a just and loving community. It is this which makes the role of the prophet, which TJ read about, central and indispensable. So a just and loving community, and that is how we treat each other, but it's also how we behave as employers, how we spend our dollars together, our time and our resources. And it means doing our part to create what my mentor, the Reverend David McPherson, who was supposed to actually be here today, but who was taken ill and unable to travel, calls heaven on earth. Our job, he says, as a fourth-generation universalist, is to make something here which we can leave for others who come after us. Friedrichs puts it this way: our highest guiding principle obliges us to create a just and loving community. And we create it and we also maintain it, because not only do we give birth to all we create here, we are its stewards. We are the only ones to ensure that it will sustain and continue so that we can pass it on to others. And it's sustained by people who continue to show up, even on hard days, who give their time, their money, so that we can offer this place of sanctuary not only to ourselves and those that we love, but also to our community, which avails itself in many, many ways of its walls, of its campus, of its generosity. So stone number 4 shows the words and the density that Adams can achieve. He says, we deny the immaculate conception of virtue and affirm the necessity of social incarnation. I spent like almost a whole hour with that one, just looking at that sentence. Like, what is he saying? Well, my UU colleagues, thank goodness, came to my rescue. They say it means good things just don't happen, people make them happen. And Friedrich says it this way: good must consciously be given form and power in history, which means that if we are to achieve a better world, then we must be willing to be its change agents. You know, in 2 weeks, we will once again host the Winter Nights program. We'll offer this space to families who find themselves homeless. We'll bring food, we'll bring our fellowship. Will allow them to enjoy the beautiful campus that has been created here, just through the little acts of cooking and washing dishes and playing with children and providing a heated and safe place. Our ideas of a just community get extended from within our own membership out into the world. And this is the same thing that happens several times a year when we help provide food at the Mountain View House in Martinez, when we work for affordable housing, when we work for peace, when we work for international understanding. You know, there are some religious narratives where good and evil are almighty powers outside of the realm of the human frame. But that's not our belief, because we are bound together by the idea that it is how we are together that makes a difference. So finally, we come to Adam's fifth stone. He says, liberalism holds that the resources that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate optimism. Ultimate optimism. In other words, we are grounded in a worldview of hope. We are the people who think that change is possible. We teach that to our children. We affirm the goodness of life. We affirm the goodness of our bodies through our whole lives curriculum. We continue to allow ourselves to grow and change as adults. And we continue to be willing to tackle hard issues such as the environment or climate change or immigration. Taken together, these 5 stones are very powerful. Power was very important to Adams because he saw what power could do in Nazism, and he wanted to know that there was a countervailing force of power that would be his part of the equation. He often writes about God not as some being in the sky, but as the power of the community. He says that we should venture a new beatitude, blessed are the powerful, for he challenges us to counter demonic abuses of power by the authentic power of our willingness to create it together. So these are a lot of words. They're like the fancy engravings on those china dinner plates that my friend is using. And they're both extraordinary and ordinary at the same time, just like those 5 stones that boy David flung at Goliath. They're just plain stones, mundane, and yet enough to bring about and defeat a tyranny. And they're ours. They're our stones. So I want to reiterate them one more time. This time by sharing 5 snapshots of life in this amazing community, which illustrate how these work in our lives, just here among us, particularly over this last year. Number 1, we are always learning. What is so inspiring here is how even in our last days, members of this community are learners. And I'm remembering this morning a particular goodbye with one of the beloved members that we lost last year. And it's a robust dialogue. There's nothing sappy or sentimental about it. She's asking me questions, and she's telling me a few things she never got around to telling me before. And I take her knowledge as a gift. I say goodbye, we exchange hugs and joke for the last time. And that is a stone. The second stone, being together matters. A small circle of people sit together and talk. Each of them here has lost a loved one, and they need to rest a while in a place where tears make more sense than dry eyes, and where the laughter that comes in remembering someone who filled your world doesn't seem out of place. That's another stone. Third stone, how we are together matters. This is a snapshot from my personal journey this year, of someone coming to me and saying she was angry about my life, about the things that were happening in my life, which were just not things she wanted to be happening. She didn't want that to be happening. It was hard to hear, but she wanted to come and tell me directly that she felt that way, and so it was a gift, a stone. The fourth, we do good to be good. It's raining. It's raining one night last winter when the new Chick-fil-A opens, and it's getting dark, and yet even in the taillight lit sidewalk, there are yellow shirts that stand out like a wave of sunshine at the witness events for the LGBTQ community. We're standing on the side of love, and they notice that. And it's a powerful stone. And the last stone, we always hope. We're at a multi-generational event, and 2 children are chasing each other around the Borton Hall, as they are prone to do. And then they come up to me and they ask me if I want to go see a flower that they have found. And And then they gather some more children, and we all troop out to the memorial garden. And they show me this little flower that's poking its head out. And I think about how this place where the ashes of our beloved dead are laid, how it's not a gloomy or dark place, how it's a place for new life and for the wonder and dreams of our children, and how that is another enduring stone. This is the time of year when we think about what this place means to us, how much we're willing to put into being stewards of this small yet mighty faith community. So let's push the food aside for a moment and take a look at the plates that we use every day. They are polished with the grit of truth and the joy of relationship. They are protected through responsibility. They are washed with the sands of change and seen through the lens always of hope. So take that, all those Goliaths out there. Take that.